Right, it is Friday late morning and we have no builders on site because they've started another job, but they're coming back this weekend, hopefully to finish everything. But I guess we'll see how that pans out. This means that for the rest of today, Kylie and I have got the free reign of the scaffolding to get up there and do one of the last big jobs on this project, which is finishing off the Roman tiles with some pointing on all of the fronts and down the sides. So I've just mixed up a batch of lime mortar, a similar kind of ratio to what I would use for a top coat of plaster, but instead of very fine sand, I've used the coarser river sand, just so that there's a little bit of bite to the mix. So it's about 2 parts lime powder to 1 part sand. But I've made the mix quite wet because I'm going to try a slightly different method of application.
It's like you need a masonry bag to fill the masonry bag.
Get your mind out of the gutter.
Your mind.
So I'm quite skeptical, but we'll give it a go.
We've had a few comments in the past saying, wouldn't it be easier to use a masonry piping bag for pointing stonework? And given the small gaps around these eaves tiles, I thought it'd be worth picking one up and having a go.
Okay, so it doesn't work like a normal culinary piping bag, you have to squeeze it much lower down. This is not really working. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I find that much easier. Yeah, piping bag is out. Trowels are in. Nice idea, and definitely worth a go. But I think the mix would have to be so wet.
Or bigger gaps.
Or have a much bigger nozzle. I could maybe cut a bigger nozzle. Oh, and interestingly, I think a seated position is actually going to be easier.
Now watching this back, I have to cringe a little bit because I know what's going to happen. But do bear with me and keep watching, as things will get a lot better. Eventually.
So I've made a bit of a mess, but it's cleaned off okay. That's the good news. The bad news is it's a bit slower than I was expecting. Or no, it's a bit slower than I was hoping. So when I turned the camera off from the last shot, it was 17 minutes to do this front, and these 2 inner bits. And when you add in the cleanup as well, it means it's going to take like half an hour per gap. So hopefully. Oh, have you seen? That looks pretty good.
Like Groundhog Day over and over and over again.
I've come up here today to have a look at the pointing, which is not filling me with joy. We noticed at the end of the day, whenever we did this first time, a couple of days ago now, that there was a bit of cracking and a bit of shrinkage of the lime between all the Roman tiles. And that's because we used a mix that was quite wet and didn't have much sand in it. And there are parts of the tiles that have been sealed, but there's parts that haven't been sealed. And so they soaked up a lot of the moisture. And there was a lot of shrinkage of the lime because there wasn't a huge amount of sand in the mix. And the reason I did that mix was so that we could test out the piping bag, but I think it took me all of 2.5 seconds to realize that that wasn't really going to work very well. So what I should have done at that stage was remixed a slightly more conventional amount of sand and lime together to make up the pointing mix, and it should have been much drier than it was. So I've just been having a bit of a scratch around to see if I can fix some of the hairline cracks, because even though this is kind of dried out, wetting it down, it can be reworked a little bit. But there are a couple of places where it shrunk so much that it's actually not bonded to the tiles in any way. So those bits I'm probably going to have to redo. So I'm going to do some more investigation, because ideally I don't want to have to remove everything that we've done. But of course, if we need to, that is what we'll do. So I'm going to see how much of it we can save, and then the pointing will continue with a slightly different mix. So on this one here, you may be able to see small cracks along the side. A little bit of a spray down. That has kind of worked. That is too loose, and the crack is too big. Up here it's also moved around quite a lot, so that one I'm going to redo.
Morning. At that level,
So it is the next day, and I have some good news, which is some of the remedial work that I did yesterday to the first round of pointing has worked. So I wet everything down and scratched out some of the hairline cracks, and it is much improved than it was yesterday. The other good news is I did a bit of a test with a different mix. It was a stiffer mix with more sand. I just did 2 tiles, and there are no cracks at all on those. So I now have a plan to move forward with the right mix and the right approach. I'm just going around with a damp brush to try and tidy these ends up a little bit. Because all the tiles are so rustic, it's been very hard to get this material on and, more importantly, scrape it off in a neat way. I now have a mix ratio that is going to work, which is good. So now we just need to finish the cleaning of all the tiles, seal all the tiles, point all the tiles, and then we'll be done. So the nice thing about using lime for this project is I didn't have to mix any up this morning. This is left over from yesterday. So as long as you stop the air from getting to it, it lasts quite a while. So this long side of the building is my challenge for today. I don't think I'm going to get it all done, but I'm going to see how far I can get with the bucket of mix I've got already. It's a nice cool day, so I should be able to stay up here for longer, but this seated position with these tiles below me is going to be a bit of a challenge, I think. At least I'm not reaching up, I'm just reaching down. So we'll see. So I actually turned the camera on to talk to you, but it turns out this is one of those activities that requires a lot of concentration, and I struggle to get my words out at the best of times. One of the things I was going to mention is where we got the arrows from eventually. Because you may remember at the beginning of this project, we thought we'd found a supplier, and then it turned out that they couldn't fulfill the order. And we placed the order, we made the payment, and then they called up to say, hey, we can't actually sell those to you anymore. But it turns out they're really easy to come by. You can just order them wherever you can get the tiles. So CS, or Coelho de Silva, who's the manufacturer of the new tiles that we used, they have all of these decorative pieces, the arrows, the finials in a few different shapes and sizes, although none that match exactly the ones that we have. They're all in their catalogue, and you can just place an order with anyone who sells the tiles. So it took about 2 weeks, I think, to arrive. We ordered them from the same place where we got the brackets for the dry ridge and the dry ridge kit. But yeah, it turns out much easier to get hold of than we thought. The other thing that I was going to say is that now I've done half of the house with this pointing, I have a slightly better idea of what I'm doing, a slightly better technique, slightly better process, and importantly, a much better mix. And the best part about that new mix is, because it's quite dry, I'm not needing to spray down the tiles in advance because there's not much moisture to be pulled out of the mix. And that means that there is not going to be anywhere near as much cleanup as is needed or was needed on the first bit that I did. And that is going to save us some valuable time and is potentially going to save our muscles as well. And so even though I'm not spraying any of this down, we're not getting any shrinkage, we're not getting any cracking, and we're not creating rivers of lime running down the tiles and making a mess everywhere, which is good.
I have to remind myself that this is a choice. We chose this.
So Kylie has cleaned all of the tiles around the entire building now for the first time. I have just got this long side of the building left to point, and then we just have to clean up one last time. We're almost there, which is good because the scaffolding comes down in a couple of days, and then we can rest a bit. So we are finally done with this mammoth project. I don't know if it came across on camera, but it was very laborious, very slow, very tedious, and we've got some very sore hands after all the first round of cleaning, the pointing, the next round of cleaning, and all the sealing as well. And I don't think we showed all of this, but we put 2 coats of sealer on before we did the pointing, and then because there was so much cleanup required afterwards, we went round and did 1 more coat of sealer afterwards. So these tiles have now got some nice weather protection, and they should be good to go for another however many years it is that they stay up here before the next crazy person comes along and renovates this building. Anyway, there is not much more to say, but even if there was, I don't think I have the energy to say it right now. When the scaffolding comes down, we're going to get some nice after shots, and we'll put together a video with the before and the after so you can see the whole roof in all of its glory, because that is something that people have requested. Something else that people have requested is some details about the costs, and so we're going to put together a how much did the roof project cost video, and we might also include some details about how much we made from all the daily videos that we did documenting the whole process. Something else that we've thought about doing is like a retrospective video, a bit more conversational, kind of podcast style, like some of our We Need to Talk videos, as like a final wrap up to the whole roof thing, answering any questions that people have, and just generally giving our thoughts on how the whole thing went. So do let us know if you'd be interested in that. If we get a positive response, then we will put something like that together as well. But for now, I think it's time to go and rest a little bit after what was a fairly long and draining project. But thank you for joining us. We will see you next time. See you later. Bye. Can you shout bye?